Not on air. Oh, there.
Oh,
Oh, we're on
yeah.
air.
Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer London, Content Director at Diversity Best Practices. I want to apologize for our late start. For some reason, we had some technical difficulties, but we're here. Again, my apologies for the late start. I wanted to welcome Jill Houghton, who's joining us today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know a little bit about how the Google Hangouts work. Some of you I see have already figured out how to ask questions. You can ask questions at any time during the event, and if you like something that you see, all you have to do is click the +1 and it will bump it up in order so that everyone knows that it's an important question to everybody. So this is meant to be interactive, so we hope you'll have lots of questions. We've already loaded some questions that our members have asked in advance, and we look forward to hearing more from you all. So this Hangout today comes out of the interest shown by our members to learn more about the Disability Equality Index, a new and exciting benchmarking tool created by the U.S. Business Leadership Network and the American Association for People with Disabilities. Before we move any further, I wanted to introduce Jill Houghton. Thank you for coming today, Jill.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Jill is the Executive Director of U.S. Business Leadership Network, or USBLN, and has over 22 years of diverse leadership experience at the federal, state, and local levels to advance the employment and economic self-sufficiency of all people with disabilities. Okay, Jill, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us the ins and outs of the Disability Equality Index. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Diversity Best Practices, for this opportunity. Again, as Jennifer pointed out, the Disability Equality Index is a tool that was created in partnership between USBLN and the AAPD, or the American Association of Persons with Disabilities. We actually formed a partnership and created an advisory committee of 20 leaders. And the advisory committee was comprised of leaders from the business and disability community. So there were folks like the general counsel from Starbucks, to the senior director of accessibility from Microsoft, who happens to be deaf, to leaders from far and wide. So we empowered this advisory committee to create a tool. And the Disability Equality Index is intended to help business. It's a tool to help business benchmark best practices, because we know that for companies that are committed to full inclusion of people with disabilities, that means not just your employees, but that means your suppliers and your customers. And this tool the Disability Equality Index is intended to be a tool to help business achieve more and be recognized for the good work that you're already doing. So that being said, let's dig in and let's talk about, so what is the Disability Equality Index? We actually piloted it with 48 Fortune 1000 companies. That pilot concluded in January of this year. Based on what we learned from those companies about the survey and about the process, we went back to the advisory committee and worked in partnership with them to make revisions as needed. We actually launched the survey, unveiled it in the public domain on June 26th. So if you go to our website at www.usbln.org and you click on Disability Equality Index, you can actually see the survey. And we would strongly encourage you to get your hands on that survey. Now, in terms of the survey, so the survey is comprised of 4 main categories. Those 4 main categories are culture and leadership, enterprise-wide access, employment practices, and community engagement and supports. Each category is weighted so that the 4 categories add up to 100 points. The culture and leadership categories were 30 points. The enterprise-wide access category is worth 10 points. The employment practices category is worth 40 points. And the community engagement and support services is worth 20 points. Also, it's important to note that within each of these 4 categories, there are subcategories. In total, there are 9 subcategories. And so to give you an idea of how it works, for example, in the culture and leadership section, the first subcategory is culture, and the second subcategory is leadership. The culture subcategory is worth 20 points. The leadership subcategory is worth 10 points. So combined, that category is worth 30 points. Overall, across the survey, there's roughly 30 questions with 100 sub-questions across those 4 categories. So all in all, there's roughly 150 questions. The questions are yes and no. And then there's the opportunities to substantiate your answers. The way the scoring works is that there is no partial credit. It's either you can answer the question yes or you can answer the question no. So there's no partial credit. So you either get all the credit or you don't. In terms of recognition and how we're going to recognize companies that take the Disability Equality Index, we, in partnership in working with our advisory committee and in working with the pilot companies, have decided that we are going to publicly recognize the top scoring companies. So in other words, if your company scores an 80 or above, you will be publicly recognized. If your company scores a 70 or below, nobody will ever even know that you took it. So in terms of those that are recognized, it's also important to know that the only thing that the public is going to know is if you're an 80 or above, is that you took it and you got an 80, a 90, or 100. Because there is no, there are 10-point increments, an 80, a 90, or 100. And they're not going to know where, like let's say you got an 80. They're not going to know where you missed the 20 points. They're only going to know that you got an 80. And we want to publicly recognize those companies that score an 80 or above. So what we're going to do is that for the companies that score 100, we're going to use a DEI logo that shows publicly that that you can use to demonstrate that you got 100 on the survey. You'll be prominently placed on lists, on our websites, at special invitation events, in best practices reports, and so on. And for companies that score an 80 to 90, we'll also be recognizing your company for your best practices and including you in our best practices report. In terms of timeline, so registration is open right now. It's open until October 24th. And if you click on our website, usbln.org, and click on Disability Equality Index, you can actually click on registration and register. Who's eligible to take this? Fortune 1000 or 1000 scope companies. We already have companies that are registering. So registration's open through October 24th. Then at the end of October, we will actually go live. So at the end of October, those companies that have registered before October 24th will be sent the link, and you will have the opportunity to participate in the survey. You will have until the end of February 2015 to complete the survey, and we will be unveiling the results in April of 2015. This is the first ever. We're really excited about this. This is very meaningful to business and meaningful to the disability community. So in April of 2015, we will be unveiling, again, only those companies that score 80 or above. There is, for companies that are already members of the USBLN, there is absolutely no fee to take the index. If you are not a member of the USBLN, there is a $500 fee. It's purely an administrative fee because both AAPD and the USBLN are nonprofit 501c3 organizations, and we will use that administrative fee to help administer the index and to in turn turn around and provide you with best practices report and results. I should point out that we also have founding partners. We created the opportunity for 15 companies to become founding partners to help us stand this project up. At this point, we have our first 7. Would like to give a special acknowledgement to Comcast NBC Universal because they are our exclusive technology founding partner. In addition to Comcast NBC Universal, we have also received founding partnerships from Northrop Grumman, CVS Caremark, DuPont, American Airlines, WellPoint, and New Additions. Now, before we open it up for questions, I went through the survey and just thought I'd pull out a few things to just, kind of wet your whistle in case you haven't had a chance to look at the survey. So, in terms of looking at the survey, I just pulled out a couple questions and I thought I'd highlight them. So, in terms of, for example, in culture and leadership, what are some of the questions that we might be asking? So the first question is, does your business have a firm-wide written statement of commitment to diversity and inclusion? And then 1A is, if yes, then we go on to say, and do you call out disability? So it's questions like this. In the leadership category, I'll call this out because what we found in the pilot with these 48 Fortune 1000 companies, for example, one specific company, and we provided confidentiality to all the companies that participated in the pilot. So there was one company that had to answer no in the leadership category to a question that says, do senior executives, those within the first 2 layers reporting to the CEO, receive individual performance evaluations? So they answered yes. The next question says, well, so if you answered yes, do their individual performance evaluations specifically include a diversity inclusion component? In this case, they could answer yes. So they said, oh, yay, okay, we're so far so good. And then the next question says, well, if yes to question 4A, then is disability inclusion specified as a component of diversity within the performance evaluations? And this is where this company said, uh-oh, wow, we never thought about this. This is really important. We want to make this change. So they came back to us and they said, we know you can't tell us who the other 47 companies were in the pilot, but can you give us some data and wash it, and that we can use, because we're getting a meeting with our CEO because we had to answer no to that question, and we want to change the answer to yes, because we're going to be in the first annual Disability Equality Index, we're going to be on the survey, and we want 100. And so we were able to provide that information to them, and they've been working with their CEO to change this practice so that, in fact, now that we're going live at the end of October 2014, they're going to be able to answer yes. So just moving on, enterprise-wide access. It talks about, one of the questions talks about emergency preparedness policies. So do your emergency preparedness policy or procedures specifically mention people with disabilities? Some of the pilot companies said, wow, that's really interesting. We never thought of that. So it's causing them to rethink things. There's another question in here on this category. Does your business have a web accessibility policy? that requires coding to the AA level of conformance, or the World Wide Web Consortium's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. So this folks that were participating in this survey were able to use this survey to help inform the folks in their IT department about these guidelines, and to be able to use this as a lever to begin to change policies and practices so that they can then in turn become more inclusive of people with disabilities as employees, as customers, and as suppliers, because people want to brand themselves as being disability inclusive. Just moving on, looking at the area of recruitment, calling out a question for you. It says, does your business have external recruitment efforts in place that are specifically geared toward hiring individuals with disabilities? So this was an opportunity for folks to go to their talent acquisition team and say, hey, are we doing this? Do we do this? And then it goes on to say, if you do this, then how are we going about that? Moving on into areas of employment, education, retention, and advancement. It says, does your business encourage employees with a disability to self-identify as being a person with a disability? And goes on to say, if yes, please select all the applicable methods of communication that are used to encourage employees to self-identify. Moving along, accommodations. This was, we had a lot of really meaningful conversations with the pilot companies in this area. There's a basic question. Does your business have a disability accommodation policy? And then if yes, is the disability accommodation policy posted in a place where employees can access it on their own? What we found is that sometimes it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. And that in fact, this was an aha moment for people to say, well, sure, we have this policy, but gosh, not everybody knows how to access it. Moving into internal, external support services, which was really our way at getting at the language surrounding customer service. We asked things like, have you conducted usability studies to verify that online chat functions work effectively with screen reading and/or assistive technology? Many companies, you're moving towards having an online chat function for your customers to be able to chat with you and ask questions. So the question becomes, well, hey, that's great. And in fact, are you doing usability studies to see if these are effectively working with screen reading and other assistive technology? So that's just highlighting a few questions. The bottom line is that the Disability Equality Index is not intended to be a gotcha. It's intended to be a tool that's going to help business benchmark your practices, your policies and practices in a very transparent way. And it's intended to be a tool to help business improve what you're doing and brand yourself, be recognized as a company that's inclusive of all people with disabilities. Jennifer, I turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. That was very helpful. As a matter of fact, it looks like you've answered one of the questions posted here, which is, why is the DEI important to business? Why should businesses go through this process? It sounds like, just from the feedback you've received already from the pilot, that it's already sparked a lot of internal conversations about where companies need to move to improve their inclusion of people with disabilities. Does that seem like the norm for the folks you've been working with so far?
Yeah, absolutely. The companies that we worked with, they not only took the survey, but we conducted follow-up surveys with them and follow-up one-on-one phone calls, and have continued to stay in contact with folks. And very definitely, the overwhelming response that we received from the pilot participants was that it was very helpful, and that they're deeply engaged in wanting to wanting to improve their policies and practices, and they also want to know what their peers are doing in this space. So this becomes a good tool to help them benchmark where they are in the scheme of things across these 4 categories.
Great, thanks, Jill. So another question that's come up is, how will USBLN support companies to improve their scores in the future? Because it shouldn't be a sort of, you know, you've reached a certain point and that's it, right? So how will you help companies in the future as they move forward with this work?
We view this as an opportunity to work in collaboration, to develop a relationship with each of the companies that participates in this. So we're prepared to provide technical assistance, to provide best practices reports, to provide the assistance that's needed to work in partnership with the company to help the company over time improve their score. So this is not just a, you know, take a survey and be done, but we see this as a collaborative, ongoing relationship, and we want to build that relationship and grow together.
Great. The next question I have from some folks is, what will the crucial resources, both internal and external, be that a company will need to leverage in order to complete the application process?
So what we found in the pilot was that the application process in general takes somewhere around 20 to 30 hours. And in terms of the resources that are needed to complete the survey, that varies according to company. So in general, we find that human resources, diversity and inclusion, or compliance takes the lead in completing a survey of this nature, and then they pull in folks from IT, from facilities, from finance, from supplier diversity and procurement across the business enterprise. However, I would call out that in some of the participating pilot companies, it was interesting because in some instances, the lead for the survey was actually their disability business resource group or employee resource group. So it was not always human resources, diversity and inclusion, or compliance.
Can you talk a little bit, do you have any more to share about that? That's an interesting, I know for many of our companies, they like to engage their, and not only like to, but rely on their employee resource groups for this kind of work. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, we did find in large part in the pilot that each of the participating companies, if they had an employee resource group or business resource group, really worked to engage those employees in this process. And like I pointed out, in some cases, they were the lead. So they were the lead in, and they used this, I think, as an opportunity to begin to build their business case internally by pulling in all the different components from across the business enterprise to go through the process of answering this survey. So I think that we're going to learn more, definitely year after year, but certainly in the coming couple of years, I think that we still have lots to learn in response to this question and others.
Yeah, sure. Don't forget, folks who are listening in, that you can ask questions by typing them on the right-hand side of your screen. Okay, moving on. Can you talk a little bit about how the data will be shared and what data will be public?
So again, in terms of what will be public are, we will name the companies that score an 80 or above. So your score is in 10-point increments. So we will name the companies that score an 80 to 90, and 90 to 100, and 100. And again, we will not break down what comprised that score. So it will just be that this is the company, this is their score. We will also create a best practices report, and we will share best practices. In terms of just in general, for the results, we'll aggregate the company's survey responses. just so that we can provide results overall. But we're not, regardless of score, like if you score below an 80, nobody is ever going to know externally that you took this. Because, again, this is not intended to be a gotcha.
Great. And so the report will include their own performance on all of the questions, correct? And then will it show a comparison to the other companies? And if so, in what ways? By industry or just generally? Can you talk a little bit about what they should expect in terms of the report they'll receive at the end?
Well, so we are actually, that's a very good question, and we're working closely with our advisory committee right now to be able to clearly enunciate the answers to that question. So our advisory committee meets actually Monday, September 29th, and this is definitely one of the things that we will be discussing with them and have been discussing with them. I would not be surprised to see it look across industries, because certainly we do pay attention to that, and I know that our members are really interested to know what their peers are doing in their industry. So I would say that it would not only show, their results, but it would also break it down by industry. But again, we're working on that with the advisory committee.
Great, thank you. And so I have a question from someone from the audience asking, how are nonprofits allowed to participate? And if so, how do they do that?
They're not. So this is for Fortune 1000 for-profit entities or Fortune 1000 scope. So we're really looking at that 3,000 employees or more, with 3 employees being in the U.S. So this Disability Equality Index is not for nonprofits.
Okay, thank you for that. One thing that came up also is, how will USBLN and AAPD collect feedback to inform the following year's surveys?
So I would envision that just like we did the pilot, we will be meeting with each of the companies as well as surveying each of the companies that participate in this, and we will be taking all of that feedback that we receive from the participating companies back to the advisory committee to inform the evolution of this tool. We will work in partnership with the companies. We don't want there to be any surprises, so we will work in partnership with those companies that are participating to help us evolve the tool and to evolve the tool together in a collaborative fashion. There are some questions in the survey that are non-weighted, and they are data points. The advisory committee thought it was premature to have them be weighted questions, but they are questions that the advisory committee thought was important to include, but not necessarily weight. So they may be areas where we may eventually, over time, certainly not overnight, begin to evolve the Disability Equality Index.
Okay, great. Someone's wondering if you could just review the timeline again.
So the timeline again is that registration is currently open through October 24th, 2014. Again, you can go to usbln.org, click on Disability Equality Index, and there is a link there to registration. So you have until October 24th, 2014 to register. We already have companies signing up. Then following that, the last week of October, at the end of October, those companies that, on October 24th, registration closes. The companies that have registered will receive the link to begin to take the survey. You will have between then to the end of February 2015 to complete the survey, and we will then have the results ready to roll out in April of 2015. And then I would not be surprised to see some additional best practices information rolled out in July of 2015, which is when we will be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it is, from our perspective, rather like the world is coming together all at once, in the sense that we're rolling out the Disability Equality Index at the same time that this is the year that we're leading up to the celebration of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
That's an exciting movement of forces together. So can you talk a little bit about some of the resources outside that companies may use that will help them in this process, meaning moving forward with this work when they realize, wow, we don't do that. And so if you can talk a little bit about USBLN, what kind of resources you provide, and other resources. I know we've talked about this in other web seminars with you, but I think given the context of today, it would be helpful for folks to get a sense of what are some helpful things out there for them.
So again, the USBLN, we're a business-to-business network. We're focused on helping business leverage disability inclusion in the workplace, the supply chain, and the marketplace. So if you boil all that down, we're based on the premise that business responds to their peers. So we are an association, a membership association of business. We have a national organization that's based in Washington, D.C., and then we have 46 affiliates across the country. So many companies, it depends on what your needs are. You may get involved at a local level with a local affiliate, or you may choose to get involved with both, and many companies do that. So what does that mean? At the national level, we have a wide variety of programs. Coming up right around the corner, September 29th to October 2nd, in Orlando, Florida, we will have our 17th annual National Conference and Expo, where corporate America comes together to learn from each other about best practices, as well as to network with the wide variety of resources. There are a lot of community partners out there, and the USBLN is a bridge. We're a gateway to community partners. So when our members raise an issue, for example, about maybe it's about reasonable accommodation, we can connect you with Lou Orsleen at the Job Accommodation Network and help make that a seamless connection. Or maybe you're looking to connect with talent with disabilities. We've got partners that we work with, like Kathy West Evans and the National Employment Team, who can help you navigate the 80 different vocational rehabilitation agencies. So our conference, you can go to usblnannualconference.org and see the agenda and the registration. I think it's open for like 8 or 9 more days. In terms of other programs, we run the nation's leading certification, the only certification for disability-owned businesses. So we were asked by IBM and Walmart to create a certification program for disability-owned businesses because it exists for women and minorities and LGBT-owned businesses, but it didn't exist for disability-owned businesses. So we have been mentored and continue to work in partnership with the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce and the Women's Business Enterprise National Council. So we have a certification program, and our members can tap into doing business with certified disability-owned businesses that are inclusive of service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. We have a mentoring program. It's kind of a unique program in the sense that it's focused on business. So we start with our members, and we reach out to our members, and we ask them who would be interested in being a mentor. We reach engineers and marketing people and finance people, not just diversity and inclusion in HR. This is a way for our members to kind of web out, if you will. And then we connect those mentors with students with disabilities. This is a been occurring for the last 3 years. It's funded by the Walmart Foundation and by the Mitsubishi Electric America Foundation. So we have we call it Career Link. We also have a new program that's funded by 2 family foundations called Going for the Gold, where we are working with McKesson, TD Bank, CSX, Boston Scientific, General Motors, and Grainger over the course of the next 3 years to help them increase their employment, increase their hiring and retention of employees with disabilities, and to work with them in partnership across the business enterprise around disability inclusion. So whether it's around driving self-identification or enhancing their reasonable accommodation process, etc. We're calling it a cohort model, and it's based on the premise, again, that business responds to their peers. So we're not only working with the individual companies, but we're bringing the companies together to learn from each other with the thinking that over time, that information will network out across our network, across their suppliers. And then I would just lastly say, we've got a lot of partners. I mean, we work, our mentoring program is in partnership with Cornell University. We work with a lot of different universities and nonprofit organizations. And ultimately, we want to be a bridge to business and help you connect with the resources that you need.
That's great. So one more time, someone's asking what the anniversary release date is again, and he apologizes for asking again.
So the anniversary, it's been unveiled. So the survey, you can see it at usbln.org. Click on Disability Equality Index. It's out there, so you can get your hands on it right now. You have until October 24th to register, and then we close registration and we go live. So you get the link, you take the survey, you have until the end of February 2015. We release results in April of 2015.
And the anniversary date of the 25th anniversary is?
The 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act is July 26th, 2015.
Great. Okay. So before we wrap up here, I just wanted to say, Jill, that I think the work that you and your partners are doing on this equality index is really great, and I think will be a very useful tool for our member companies who, as you know from interacting with them in the past, are really dedicated to building an inclusive environment for people with disabilities at their organizations. I also can say, based on all of the resources you provide and all of the partnerships that you have, that there are plenty of resources for folks who need some help strengthening their work in this area. And just so you all know, for all of you who are watching, if you want to find out more about that, you can obviously get in touch with us here at Diversity Best Practices or with Jill directly. But feel free to contact us because you know where to find us. DBP members always know where to find us. So thank you so much, Jill, for joining us. Any closing things before we wrap up?
I just want to thank Diversity Best Practices for the opportunity to continue to work together. We at the USBLN really greatly appreciate the opportunity to work with Diversity Best Practices and think very highly of your work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I should say that was not scripted. I did not. That was great. Thank you. We are so happy to have you, Jill, as our friend and USBL, and it's a great resource for us as well as we try to provide as many resources as we can for our members. So before we finish, just wanted to let everyone know that Diversity Best Practices, we will be posting a video of the program on our website and on our YouTube channel, and we'll send you all the link to that, and you'll be able to share it with folks in your company for those of you who were not able to have everyone join us today. If you have suggestions, we really do want to keep doing Google Hangouts on Air. They're a great resource, video resource, because we know that not everyone can travel to our member conferences or get on our web seminars, and this is a great way to connect you with all our friends out there in diversity and inclusion. So if you have any suggestions for future topics or people you'd like to hang out with and ask questions to, you can email Megan Donnelly or myself, and we'll do the best we can. So thank you again to Jill Houghton from USBLN and to all of you for participating, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.